Hey guys, I'm really excited to share with you my review of the BenQ HT3550. I know a lot of you have been patient for me to get this out. I've been taking my time. I've spent about a month with this projector right here to gather all of my thoughts, my impressions. I also wrote up a written review that I'll link to in the description so you can view it there. Before we dive into this projector, I want to give a little bit more context on what I believe this projector is to the 4K projector market today. So to do that, I want to talk about a projector that BenQ launched back in 2013 called the W1070. It was the very first projector launched in the world at less than $1,000 that had 1080p and 3D. And so the buzz that it created was that, oh my gosh, we have a projector at less than $1,000 that can do 1080p and 3D. And what it also did is it shortened the throw that you could do that type of image as well, which was really, really important to me. I had a very unique setup at the time that was awesome for. And so on one hand, the price was great. And so on the other hand, was the performance good as well? And I think that most reviewers, including myself, would say yes, it was good. I think it was Art Fireman who coined the term light cannon in his review of the W1070, and so it had really good brightness, color accuracy out of the box was great, really good sharpness, 3D performance was good to boot, and so it was just a very well packaged projector at the lowest price point that you could get a 1080p 3D projector for. And so what it was a category killer. It was a silver bullet for the 1080p 3D market at that time. And it went on to become one of the best-selling projectors of all time. And to give just one more layer of context, I want to talk about the 4K projector crop that has been launched in the last year. So last year, BenQ launched and was really one of the first projector manufacturers to launch affordable 4K, along with Optima. Epson had some players in there, Acer, ViewSonic. And I think that a lot of people wanted these projectors to be those no compromise silver bullet projectors. But the fact of the matter was that there was a trade-off somewhere, there was a compromise somewhere. It wasn't that, bullseye silver bullet that the W1070 was for the market at that time. Besides the point, those projectors were the most affordable way to get into 4K, and they still represented a good value if that's what you wanted. So let's fast forward again to 2019 and dig into the HT3550. So off the top of the head again, this is a 4K DLP HDR projector. It's producing a pixel perfect 8.3 million pixels on the screen. It does this by shifting its native 1080p DMD chip 4 times using TI's XPR technology. It's a 0.47 inch DLP chip, is an RGB color wheel. What it also does, as we're doing a hardware tour here, it introduces lens shift back into these projectors, something that was missing in the TK800 as well as the HT3550, so that's very welcome for placement flexibility. The other thing that this projector does, and I think I mentioned this before, is it is a shorter throw compared to the HT2550. This is, in fact, almost the exact same offset, lens shift, as well as throw ratio as the W1070 and HT2050A, making it more or less a plug-and-play replacement for owners of those projectors. Now, on paper, some other things that I thought looked very good when I saw the spec list were things like the introduction of a dynamic iris, creative frame interpolation, being able to smooth out fast-moving images. It also is introducing 95% DCI P3 color gamut color space coverage, which is a first for a DLP projector. So very, very good color accuracy out of the box. In fact, you'll get with the BenQ HT3550 a factory color calibration report. So one thing that BenQ has always done very, very well is out of the box color accuracy. And I've got to say, this has been the best color accurate image that I've seen out of the box from BenQ. Another big thing about this projector is USB user upgradable firmware. So the previous models, if there was a firmware update, the user had to ship in their HT3550 or TK800, and then BenQ would ship it out. So that was just a headache for everyone involved, but the reason why is because there was 3 processing chips, or maybe even more, that those projectors were handling 3D with. The XBR shifting, the 4K, the HDR, SDR, 1080p content, and that was done by multiple systems on a chip within that projector. The HT3550 consolidates that and makes it much easier, not only for the user interface to be navigated through, but also user USB firmware upgrading, which is a very underrated feature of this projector. A couple other things before we do that is HLG, Hybrid Log Gamma. This is a way for broadcasters to be able to broadcast HDR images efficiently without having to do multiple streams of metadata. And so broadcasters like BBC, DirecTV, YouTube, they are all starting to adopt that HLG standard for HDR over the air or the internet. And finally, on the hardware side, there's a few other bells and whistles that this BenQ is rocking, such as an improved new 10-element all-glass lens array. BenQ is claiming that that helps with contrast and overall image quality and color accuracy. This little black placard, I reviewed the BenQ W1070 6 years ago, and one of my complaints on it is right above the projector, there's a big halo, big light ring. As a result, the light reflecting off of the lens array. BenQ finally listened to me and added this little black placard that is the 4K logo. I don't know if you can see that, there we go. And so that fixes it completely, which is great. The other thing that I like about this on the hardware side of things is that there is no light leakage off of the front. In fact, for how small this projector chassis is, there is very little light leakage. In fact, if you want to look closely, I mean, that's the only spot where there could be potential light leakage. And even then, it's pointed behind the projector. That was my only gripe with the W1070 is how much light leaked out of the front grille. That's been fixed with the BenQ 3550, even relative to last year's HT3550, which had the grille on the front. So I'd like to see more projector companies adopt this, at least for these smaller projectors that can't really find a place to put all that light. A few other things before we dive in. The Hdmi chipset, if you are considering the Epson 4010 or 5040, perhaps I had the Epson 4000 for a fair amount of time. And one thing that led me to really come to the BenQ 4K Fold was the fact that it has a full bandwidth 18 gigabits per second HDMI 2 chipset. Really the primary benefit of that is being able to play on your PS4 Pro or your Xbox One S at 4K HDR 60 frames per second, whereas the 10 gigabits per second chipset just can't handle that color space, can't handle the 4K HDR at 60 frames per second. It can only do 30 frames per second. But let's go ahead and dive into on-screen performance. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about here is the HDR performance. And this is a scene from Avengers: Infinity War. It's hard to really reproduce and tell you what I'm seeing with my 2 eyes, and so I'll try my best here. I've spent a lot of time with the Epson 4000, the HT3550 TK800, and I've talked about their HDR performance before, and they were pretty good. I especially like the TK800 and how it handled the extra brightness and how it leveraged that to a good HDR image. There's a few things that the HT3550 really has going for it in terms of producing a very, very good HDR image. Really, it's a combination of hardware and software. On the hardware side, you have the new 10-element lens array. You've got the dynamic iris. On the software side, you've got the new HDR Pro auto tone mapping, and that's really a happy marriage between the two. The dynamic iris implementation is extremely good, especially for this price range of projector. And so with the dynamic iris, there's no dim delay. It doesn't dim an otherwise fine and bright scene. And if anything, it actually increases the brightness, which is great. The auto tone mapping, everything's working in tandem. The auto tone mapping knows what the dynamic iris is doing, and so it pumps up a little bit more brightness in parts of the image where it needs it, and then dims other parts of the image where it doesn't. Very, very good localized black levels. Now in this scene, the shadow detail is very good in the clouds. I think that the art direction is overall just very good. The bloom in the sun with my eyes, I can actually see the dot of the star. Not so much on the iPhone from what I've seen, but it's just kind of hard to reproduce that. And so this scene is a scene that I tested with the Epson 4000, HT3550, as well as TK800. And the reason why I feel that this scene is so critical, and frankly those projectors struggled a bit at, is because there's a lot of yellow, a lot of reds, a lot of oranges against dark black backgrounds. And what typically happens in HDR implementations, when you get a combination of warmth on the screen against black backgrounds, it tends to hotspot those reds and oranges a little bit too much and overcook them. Not so with the HT3550. I was really impressed with the way shadow detail as well as highlight detail, where those oranges, those reds from the flames, the lava, is not overblown and blooms like it did a little bit on those projectors. So I'm gonna thumb through a little bit of this scene here. I can't really play it, but you can kind of see here, and it's really hard to reproduce what I'm seeing with an iPhone image, but very good contrast black level as well as details in this scene. So I'm gonna go into settings here, talk about a few things. First things first, the picture mode automatically changes over into a picture mode called HDR 10 when HDR content is recognized, which is really nice not to have to create a new user mode called HDR and manually switch over to that when I'm watching HDR content. Plug and play, set it and forget it. I'm a tinkerer, and so I fiddle with settings up and down. I've not had to do that with this projector. I've just left almost everything at the default value. Now going into an advanced, I did change one thing, and that's HDR brightness to +1 for my 160-inch image. But even at 0, it's still a really nice image. And then at +1, it actually remaps the entire image based on that setting so as to not wash out the image with the increased brightness. Color temperature, color management, left at default. Cinema Master, there's a few settings here. I just like to turn everything off here sometimes, and you can play around with this and see what you think. But color enhancer, flesh tone, pixel enhancer 4K, this is all familiar to the HT2550. And then what we add here is the motion enhancer 4K. And this is where you change your setting for the MEMC or CFI, which is the creative frame interpolation. And so that's going to be the feature which smooths out the image. I really only use this for sports. Do not recommend it for movies, but it's there if you want it. Now I want to talk about the dynamic iris. Now, if I turn dynamic iris off, you notice like the image actually dims a little bit. And that's what I love about dynamic iris, is it actually, in scenes where it doesn't really need it, it actually helps to, and this is the tone mapping working as well, it actually brightens up the image just a bit. Brilliant color on off, you can change that there as well. Now wide color gamut, this is the setting where you engage the DCI P3. And I'm gonna show you what the difference is between off and on. So I'll turn it on, off, on, off. I'm gonna put my camera right to the projector so maybe you can hear it. I'm gonna turn that back off. So you can kind of hear it. I'm gonna turn it back on, off, on, off, on. So you can kind of hear it click, and that's the filter being slid over the light path. And I actually found that with the wide color gamut on, I'd like to turn brilliant color off. I think that those two compete with one another. So what I feel about the wide color gamut is it's really intended for screens that are smaller than, I'd say, 120 inches. People are saying that the calibrated lumens on a picture with the wide color gamut filter set to on is around 800 lumens, 600 to 800 lumens. And for my screen, I usually leave it off, but I did watch a movie with it on, and your eyes just get used to it, and the color that it reproduces is just like truly awesome. Okay, light mode. Normal, economic, and smart eco. So smart eco is software dimming. I do notice a little bit of dim delay with the smart eco, and so I don't really touch that. Just throw it in normal, and dynamic iris set to on. You can't have dynamic iris on and smart eco on, so if I change this to smart eco, it turns off the dynamic iris. So I'm gonna turn this back to normal, and now I can turn the dynamic iris back on. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is 3D, and I feel like the HT3550 and TK800 kind of took a step back in 3D. It took a long time to handshake, and it didn't auto-recognize some of the content. It was a pain. When you got it working, it worked pretty well. There was some green tin issues, but I actually enjoyed it. With the HT3550, it does a very good job with 3D. I feel like it's back to where we were with the W1070, where it would automatically recognize 3D content and do a good job displaying that. I'm going to do two use cases. So I'm going to display 3D content from my NVIDIA Shield through Plex, and then I'm going to switch over to a Blu-ray and show you how that works when 3D is engaged from a 3D Blu-ray player. So let's play this now. With side-by-side, all of my content on Plex is side-by-side. I want to pause. So on this, once you have the side-by-side content playing, just go to 3D mode, side-by-side. And when it engages, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, usually it's about 5 or 6 seconds compared to like the 20 to 25 seconds on the TK800, which is definitely a good thing. So now we're in 3D mode, and the brightness I feel is pretty good. This is a 160-inch screen. It displays in 120 hertz, DLP link. I really enjoy watching 3D movies on this actually. So I'm gonna go over to Blu-ray. Alexa, turn on the Blu-ray. So we're back to 4K mode. And now we are going to play a Blu-ray and kind of show you how that works. So automatically started playing. And now we're going to go into, so you can see here it's handshaking, takes about 5-6 seconds to handshake. Now with Blu-ray content, Blu-ray 3D, so now it's in 3D mode. With Blu-ray content, it automatically pops into 3D mode, which is great. So you don't have to mess with any settings with 3D Blu-rays. So it's in 3D mode right now. Okay, so I want to go through a few video modes, picture modes with you. So what we are displaying right now is cinema. And cinema is, I feel, the best blend of brightness and color accuracy, and I feel is really good just right out of the box. And so we'll go through these. The first picture mode is bright, and this is going to produce a really bright and ugly green tinted image that you can use in a pinch if you need it, but to be honest, you should never really use this image mode. But there you go. The next one is Vivid TV. I've used this a few times, like sitcoms and just like on my Xfinity DVR, and it, you know, amps up the color, amps up the saturation, and it's not bad, especially with certain content, and it brightens up the image a little bit as well. So maybe sports, sitcoms, TV, something like that. I showed you cinema mode, we'll go back there. I'm gonna pop it into digital cinema. This engages the DCI P3 color filter, and so the color accuracy is actually very, very good, but I feel it's too dim for my 160-inch diagonal screen. I'd recommend this, like I said before, for screens 120 inches or less in a dark light controlled theater. Not a bad image though. And then I'm gonna go back to cinema. You also have a user configurable picture mode that you can save an image mode to as well and customize it there, rename it. So there you have the picture modes. I've left pretty much everything at the default values. Again, I just feel that this projector does a very, very good job with default values right out of the box. Going into advanced gamma selection, I think this is at 2.4 out of the box. I moved it to 2.2 since I feel that's kind of the gamma that this tends to skew towards, but it's fine at 2.4 where it was by default. Color temperature, color management, all that's at default. Again, Cinema Master, I left this one at default as well. In HDR, I had them all set to 0.
But this one, I did just leave where it was when I got it as well, except I don't super love the motion enhancer. But it's, I mean, it does a good job. I just don't like the feature overall, so don't hold that against me. Dynamic iris on, off, we went through that. Light mode, normal, I just leave it in normal all the time. I like my bright image with my big screen. A few things you can do here. This is where you manually engage 3D like we went through before. HDR. Auto off, I leave it in auto. Silence. Silence is where it disables the XPR shifting for the 1080p chip to produce the 4K image. If you engage this, it is going to put it into 1080p mode. And what I like about this, the menu, everything is so much faster than the HT3550 and TK800. And I mean, what they did is they consolidated the processing from multiple chips down to one or two. And that just led to so much improvement from handshaking to power on time. Power on time is actually 20 to 25% faster than its predecessor. You just saw that silence moving into silence mode on the TK800 and HT3550 took, it feels like 20 to 30 seconds, and you can do that in just a few seconds on this, which is nice. So the silence mode is going to engage a native 1080p image, and then when you turn that to off, it will go back to the 4K image. Other things, you got the auto keystone. I don't really mess with that, but it is there. Other than that, I mean, it's your basic stuff that you'd get from a BenQ projector. Want to talk very quickly about firmware version 1.0.0. I just updated this from what it was before in the sample engineering unit that I got, and the USB upgradable firmware is awesome. So on this guy, the USB port is on the back. So all I had to do is go to BenQ's website, and it was there as the HT3550 firmware. I downloaded it, stuck it in that USB port just to the right of the HDMI cable. It was very straightforward. I just went into the USB firmware upgrade, clicked on USB firmware upgrade, but it walked me right through it, and my firmware was upgraded in about 3 or 4 minutes. This is huge because before this, you had to ship in your BenQ projector, and then they would update it, and it was a huge pain in the rear to do, and it cost both parties a bunch of money, but there was really just no way around it. But now with the user updatable firmware, I mean, there's really no downsides to getting this early on while BenQ works out some final kinks that it has. You know, on my unit, speaking of kinks, I think the only couple things that I'd have a gripe on this particular unit is the focus uniformity on this lens isn't fantastic in the sample engineering unit. I've been told that that will be fixed in mass production, and as engineering units go, they are rough around the edges. There's also a minor amount of chromatic aberration. I only noticed it because I had a peer tell me about it, and I put my nose to the screen and it was there. Again, that could be down to the unit here, but so in wrapping up this review, I want to revisit again briefly the BenQ W1070. At the beginning of this review, I mentioned that the W1070 was a silver bullet in the 2013 projector market, simply because of just how well packaged it was relative to its price, relative to its performance, relative to the competition and its peers at the time. There just was something unique about that projector, and it caught consumers' attention. That's what I believe the HT3550 is today. I think that this projector, the HT3550, has the opportunity to be that category killer, to be that silver bullet for 4K projectors in 2019, and will be the projector that brings 4K projection into the mainstream. The HDR implementation is among the best I've ever seen, if not the best that I've seen on a projector, with the auto tone mapping and how it works in concert with the dynamic iris and the new lens array. The whole package puts on the screen a beautiful image relative to the price of this projector that punches well above its weight with performance. Black levels and contrast are vastly improved compared to its predecessors, thanks in large part to the dynamic iris, the new lens, the auto tone mapping, the lack of gray border. What you also get in this projector is a 4K image. I mean, that's got to be at the top of your list if you're going to consider this projector. User upgradable firmware,
a reintroduction of lens shift. I mean, these are things that other projectors have, but as far as packaging them all together in one feature set at a price less than $1,500, there's just simply nothing on the market right now that can compete directly with this at the time. So let's back out here. So should you buy the BenQ HT3550? So I would say if you are in the market for a 4K projector, 4K HDR is at the top of your priority list, and your budget's $1,500, my answer to that is yes, 10 times out of 10, if $1,500 is your ceiling. If your ceiling is $2,000, my answer to that is still yes, like maybe 9 out of 10 times. If you have an extra $1,500 to spend and you're up to $3,000, you should still be considering this projector. There's other projectors you might want to consider again if that extra $1,500 worth of performance is worth it. That's the question that you always need to be asking yourself. I mean, just putting things in perspective, this projector performs very, very, very well for the price. And so I'd recommend it wholeheartedly. I'm going to be doing some other reviews of some projectors soon here, so let me know if you guys have questions. I will sincerely try to get to them as soon as possible, but as a busy working man and a father of 3 with 1 more on the way, it might be a few days before I get to you. But absolutely comment below if you have questions or if there's specific things that you're wanting to see, maybe in another review. This is absolutely an amateur review, so don't be too hard on me. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next one.